I think Dr. Anil Dhall, sir, you can take over and start the procedure.
All right. So I guess we've also had the privilege of listening to a lot of exciting presentations in telemedicine, which as cardiologists we may not have really attended so much of teledentistry as we have in the last few minutes because of some delays. So I just want to check if everybody is in. I can see most names on. So if everybody is in, I would like to welcome everybody for this symposium on telecardiology, and this is something which we know is going to be important. And if I have, yeah, I can see Dr. Mathur is here. So he was. I can see Ranjit Suri's, but I can't see his video. I woke him up. It was 1 a.m. in the morning, and I know the delays. My big apologies, Ranjit. So
No, I'm getting into the zone, Anil. I'm brewing a cup of coffee, so
right.
I'll be with you shortly.
All right. So I am going to just share a screen if that's okay, and this is going to slideshow, and that's it from start. So basically what we've done is we've put together a set of real experts, domain experts. We have Professor Ranjit Suri, who is a professor of cardiac electrophysiology at Mount Sinai. He is my college senior, and I've known him for very long. He has done some outstanding work on not only on telecardiology, but telecardiac electrophysiology, monitoring, home monitoring of devices, cybersecurity, and so it's going to be great to hear from him. Unfortunately, it was 1 a.m. and I think there was this little confusion about Eastern Standard Time and Indian Standard Time, and I had to wake him up. But he's kindly woken up and he's brewing some coffee for himself. I would also like to welcome my very good friend, Dr. P.P. Mohanan, who is right now the president of the Cardiological Society of India. He's a very senior interventional cardiologist with he's located in Thrissur, and he has been steering a lot of cardiology work for the last so many years, especially in heart failure and intervention. Apart from general cardiology, and the reason we have him here is because I've been trying to bug him that we must do something to ensure that we have structured disease reporting in cardiology, and we can put together something so that for the future we should be having a good telecardiology practice.
Morning, Anil.
Morning, sir. Welcome to this. Ajit is probably in another hall because. He's, as we know, he's the chief cardiologist of Madras Medical Mission in Chennai, and he is I call him the soul of STEMI India, which is probably one of the first tele-based initiatives for treating acute myocardial infarctions, and it'll be great to have his experience. He promised to join as soon as his 8-minute talk in another platform was over. So I think he may not be here just now, but we would welcome him all the same. Atul is director of interventional cardiology, and he was going to do a Millen-Soman Act. When a little while ago I called him and told him it's time. And well, he is a cool dude cardiologist who does every aspect of interventional cardiology, structural cardiology, peripheral interventions, aortic interventions, and also brings a lot of wisdom and sagacity to cardiology. So I welcome you, Atul. Professor Manokar is a professor of cardiology and at the Sri Ramchandra University, and he's got special interest in telecardiology. Dr. Nishith Chandra, our good friend, is probably the most tech-savvy cardiologist we have in the country, and he's my go-to guy whenever I have a tech issue to solve, especially with the Apple background or Apple ecosystem. He's a great guy, a great interventional cardiology. All the toys, including imaging and physiology and technology, is something which Nishith likes to play with. Ashwini, if he's joined, is my classmate from college, and I think he's the president-elect of the Telemedicine Society, great administrator, a lot of experience in medical informatics. Dr. Oommen John from the George Institute is a senior research fellow. He's trained in internal medicine at Christian Medical College, Ludhiana, and has done executive business management training. He works with the World Health Organization and CRO on vaccine development and clinical decision support tools. So I think he's a member of the Indian Association for Medical Informatics, and he's going to contribute extensively. Charith is a very special cardiologist who is actually involved with a company which he started called Tricog, which is doing tele-ECG. They are participating in some state government STEMI projects. We've also tried to put up a STEMI initiative, taking their help. And they are now also coming to TeleEcho, which is like a POCUS ecosystem, which they're going to be showcasing all over the country. Sujeeth. Is joining us. He's an interventional cardiologist, structural interventionist from Stockton, California, and he runs a company called Click to Clinic, which has two different avatars, one Indian avatar and one US avatar, depending on the considerations of care in both the places. And he brings a lot of experience in this subject. He practices a fair amount of telecardiology in his routine practice. Manick Rajendran, we all know, is somebody who does not require any introduction to most people here. He's worn every hat possible and involved with technological advances in medicine, has got a great sense of medical informatics, how things are going to progress and how technology and medicine can integrate. So I welcome you all to this panel discussion. I have a motley set of slides here, and which are just going to be the kind of a basis for discussion. I would request everybody to pitch in as and when they feel like, and the only thing is that once it becomes a free-for-all, then I might have to kind of intervene a little. So a welcome word from my side, and just an acknowledgement that you're there. I know Atul is there. Professor Manokar, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Nishith is there, I know is there. Oommen is there. Charith is there. Sujeeth, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, very well. All right. So we start, and you know, one of the reasons why we are here today is because this year has been very unfortunately a year, and we've all had to huddle up into Zoom meetings rather than having physical interactions. And that has taken us, the government also, to enunciate the telemedicine guidelines on 25th of March this year. But post-COVID, I would really like to hear everybody's opinion. Is there the exponential increase in telehealth as we were expecting? Do you think that there's going to be a growing demand to reevaluate the healthcare delivery model, but actually the true value of care? Do we have cooperation from insurers and payers as of now? So let me have a comment by Dr. Mohanan and Atul to start this discussion. Dr. Mohanan, sir, if somebody's got two phones or two devices, I would request you to mute one of them because there's an echo. Dr. Mohanan, sir.
I think you're on mute, Dr. Mohanan.
Probably the only words you're going to...
Okay.
as you rightly said, even though telemedicine has been in vogue for the last 2 decades, the pandemic brought in the usefulness of it. The neurosurgeon from SRM, she talked to us telemedicine, Ramchandra or somebody 20 years ago. The pandemic really brought us the importance of telecardiology into the prominence. Amongst us, I think our electrophysiology guys were the primary use of cardiology. And of course, then the STEMI program came, we opened up another vistas. And quite rightly said, I think our substantial proportion of our outpatient could be managed virtually. No doubt about that. Maybe, except even the acute. Now, acute care cardiology is now being is another area which possibly will come into the purview. But at least the chronic diseases has been a definite role for that. I will not say the real proportion because we have not been using it to that extent that some of you have been using it. Anil.
So great, sir. Now, Atul, do you think that the Indian public is willing to change from an in-store experience to an Amazon, Flipkart, Myntra experience as far as healthcare is concerned, or do you think they would still prefer an in-store experience?
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Anil, for involving me in this discussion. It seems very exciting. Well, the Indian psyche is a little, thought process may be a little different from what it is in the developed world, because the public at large has been exposed to IT for a longer period of time. But there is a definite change which is now coming in the Indian society also. And especially the COVID era has brought about a major change in people, that they have restored themselves to the digital world. So I remember in my OPDs when before the COVID era, a patient would not be satisfied until I had auscultated the patient. They would, and in case, although we knew in our minds that most of the patients can be done with, looked after with, when you have a busy OPD, that we can look at the reports and make a diagnosis, and even if it's a coronary artery disease. But there are some patients who still want you to put your stethoscope on their lungs and auscultate their heart, and you can suddenly see the gleam of happiness they will show apparently at that particular time. It is not going to be very easy for all this to go away abruptly. It is going to be a gradual change, but we are in the watershed time, and more and more people will, as they're getting used to shopping on Amazon, they will also move towards web-based medical services. Except for sick patients who need to get into the hospital in the domain of the physical presence of the doctor.
Thank you so much, Atul. Nishith, do you think that how much percentage of our outpatient care could become virtual? I have given a provocative figure of 70%, but I would like Nishith, I would like Mr. Manik Rajendran also to give a perspective on how much percentage do you think we can become virtual?
So first of all, thank you, Dr. Anil, and thank you, Ashwini, my close friend, for including me in this very exciting talk, because usually we have been flooded with the pandemic of webinars over our cardiology subjects, but this is a breath of fresh life, and as well as a subject which is very close to my heart. So as far as your question that would 70% of the outpatient care could become virtual, so that I have my reservations because of the Indian mindset. The people still would like to see the doctor face to face, and rightly so, because everything cannot be done through the telemedicine. It has its limitations. Just seeing the reports, we cannot make a diagnosis. We have to have a visual interactions. We have to see him, and that gives a confidence to the patient as well as our relatives. So 70% is too liberal.
But you mark the word. It is not should. It is could. So therefore there is a challenge here, and we understand the challenge. So you very rightly brought that out. But let's get a perspective from somebody who's more in technology. Let's get Mr. Manik Rajendran. What do you think, sir? That could this become virtual?
Thank you, Doctor. Home health is a phrase that health-bed people have been using for over a decade. We did not know in what format it's going to come up. Now we know that a number of devices have been fast-tracked to come into the marketplace. I mean, even a simple pulse oximeter has come in with a Bluetooth enablement. So you would see that a number of the virtual aspect would come in because of the fact that maybe up to 10 to 12 parameters can be monitored virtually, remotely. And we did just that during the COVID lockdown. We ensured that people could be monitored at home, so that hospitalization is a question that a monitoring doctor could take over only with simple virtual connection. So I would say, when you say 70%, that 70% would actually get dissipated into very specific areas of care. We know that 80% of everything that we would come across is probably self-limiting. And maybe those self-limiting things can probably skew up to the 70%.
All right. Thank you very much, Manick. Can I get inputs now from Dr. Sujeeth Reddy and Dr. Ranjit Suri, so that we can get the US perspective on how much percentage of care could become virtual in cardiology? Sujeeth, are you there?
Yes, Dr. Dhall. Yeah, that's a very good question and very dear to my heart, actually. Because Dr. Mathur mentioned, the patients having a feel, like, the human touch, the therapeutic benefit that a person gets when, there's a human touch involved in the care. I was about the same opinion earlier, and I was tracking the telemedicine at some point, like, way back, and I read an article about the stethoscope, the digital stethoscope coming out, and that one, with the data sets from the digital stethoscope being uploaded into an app or into a server and then transmitted to the doctor. When I saw that, if you can have a digital stethoscope that can give you heart sounds, lung sounds, peritoneal sounds from the abdomen, what is the real need for a doctor to put the stethoscope on the patient, other than the placebo effect that the patient gets when there is a human touch to it. So that is when
we all had very exciting stories.
We
all had very exciting stories about doctors auscultating patients with their stethoscope still around their neck and not in their ears. So we understand that, but I want to know, post-COVID, how much has been the transition in your practice to a virtual care?
Yeah, so that's exactly where I'm coming right now. Your 70% I'm doing right now.
Or you're doing right now. So great. Yes. So Ranjit, if your coffee is brewed.
So Anil, the coffee is not only brewed, it's in the system.
Great.
Two ways to split this. First is the pre-COVID adoption, and then what happened in 2020. I mean, part of the reason we're here is because of this pandemic. It's an accelerant, it's a catalyst, but the change had already happened in electrophysiology. So most of our device checks, pacemakers and defibrillators and implantable loops, are remotely monitored. And that's almost continuous. Every day the information gets pushed. Moving from that model of checking defibrillators every 3 months and pacemakers every 6 months, it was daily monitoring. It was already happening, because that's physiologic signals coming from the patient generated on a daily basis. So EP has gone in this direction earlier because of that ability. What COVID has done, we'll come to in a second, but let me tell you why we were so keen on adopting this. I've practiced in New York City. It's very expensive to come visit the doctor. Parking is like $35 to $50. You've got to bring another family member with you. All of that led to early adoption by patients who there are, and there's no question what Dr. Chandra has just said about the patient that wants to see the doctor. And not every patient sort of gravitates towards this. And there's certainly the power, not only of the physician experience, the power of placebo, very strong, but when it competes with other forces like the cost of coming to see the doctors, oftentimes money wins. And for the physician, I think the US and Australia are two countries where remote monitoring is well compensated. And one of the reasons for that adoption is because there's reimbursement for it. So that's the backdrop. Against that came the pandemic. And in the month of March, April, May, New York City was like the Wuhan of the US in terms of hospital capacity, doctor's offices shutting down. At that time, 100% of all device checks and EP consultations were telemedicine. The only patients after that initial spike that was being seen in the office are that 5 or 10% of people that need reprogramming. That's something that the feds won't allow you to do remotely. And the new consultation. We're having a second wave now, and we're heading back to about 95% of the patients being monitored remotely. Obviously, this does not work for patients that have no implantables and where you can't measure signals. I posted in your chat group a video from Hadassah in Israel where they developed this model for delivering those wearables, whether it's a digital stethoscope or pulse oximetry or temperature measurement, and they use that to manage patients in the middle of a COVID illness. So I think wearables will change this for everybody, including people who are outside cardiology.
So we can make out Ranjit is awake, and he is actually clarified a lot of this for a lot of us. Unfortunately, electrophysiology is largely electrogram driven, and something which can be digitized into a binary 0 and 1 and can be easily transmitted. But a lot of medicine, as the point which Nishith was making, may not always be just very binary. So let's examine what are the barriers to a telecardiology practice, because virtual visits can actually be just glorified phone conversations or video consultations without proper sensors and data, which is shared in an efficient workflow. But when we equip it with the proper tools, like Ranjit was talking about, virtual visits can become really meaningful. And but we need an integrated sensor strategy, not just the Hadassah video, but we need an integrated sensor strategy with a suite of sensors which is validated. Because eventually, and here I would like to call in Charith, because he uses a lot of artificial intelligence, and he uses a lot of artificial intelligence in his system with predictive analytics, and he is right now doing it for ECG. But eventually, I think he's also planning to get it done for an ecosystem. So let's just have Charith in to discuss how we can make this transition from a glorified phone conversation to a meaningful consultation. Charith.
Thank you very much, sir. And I've been listening with great excitement towards this conversation. There are two perspectives. One is the patient's perspective, and they love not coming to the hospital at this point of time. And the physician's perspective is, hey, I'm not doing as good a job as I would do as an in-person consult. And the problem today, which can be solved very well with technologies to bridge these two worlds, is, as you very rightly pointed out, is data integration. Right now, the system of medicine that we have, unfortunately, has poor reporting, poor long-term follow-up of either symptoms, disease, or investigations. So the ad hoc system which is there today, all it needs is to put together the tools so that we as clinicians can not only look at patients' symptoms, but also data from different devices, may it be from ECG, may it be from echo, may it be from home care sensors. As you very beautifully wrote there, a suite of sensors and back-end integration. And I believe that is what will absolutely turn the corner of us being able to provide a far better experience for both the patients and more importantly for providers such as us, so that we can do a far better job and not look at PDFs coming in via email and different labs that are happening.
So great point, Jared. Thank you for those comments. But there is a lot of difference in the US practice and Indian practice. I think 80% of US hospitals have an EMR called Epic. It's a standard EMR, and they function with that just like anybody would function in Salesforce would function, or anybody else would function. But we in India, if you ask a hospital, do you have an electronic medical record? The only electronic medical record is handwritten records, which are being digitized, or not even being digitized, which are just being scanned and kept in cloud. So we actually need a very detailed kind of EMR integration, and this is a major effort. Manokar, because you've been working and you've interest in telecardiology, and you are actually professor of cardiology at Sri Ramchandra. So you let us hear your viewpoint on the EMR and the EMR integration which is required.
Good morning, everybody. It is a pleasure to be on this forum. Sir, as you rightly pointed out, in fact, we did an evaluation. In fact, I do not know of any hospital chain in India which has a dedicated EMR where everything is entered. So even big groups like Apollo, Fortis, and all the institutions, nobody has the EMR for OP records. Some of them do maintain some degree of EMR in IP, and that, as you rightly said, it is all only digitization of the written documents. In fact, this Epic is like very, very far off and a dream kind of thing for Indian hospital setup. Not even new hospital setups consider investing in EMR, and that's a very sad truth. So practically speaking, not a single patient IP record is digitized or available for access across any hospital system in the country. So that's a very, very bleak future in terms of hospitals. But one good thing that is happening is with the newer platforms of which have for OP records. So these things are coming up in a big way. So I think unlike the US, where they started with the hospital and went on to OP, maybe in India we will do the reverse way. Most of the clinicians nowadays are going for OP records being maintained based on this cloud platform and all.
Guidelines. The telemedicine guidelines mandate that we preserve our records of interaction, and which is the first time that in clinical work in India, in licensed clinical work in India, there was a record keeping of the outpatient work which is mandated. Otherwise, a court could not ask you for your outpatient records, because most of the outpatient records are scribbled by a physician or a resident and handed over to the patient, and the patient comes back to the doctor the next time saying that, I'm sorry, my bag got stolen in the bus, or my grandchild scrawled on it, and those records are completely lost. So let's have a perspective from Oommen John, who has been working in this field, as to how we are going to create an acceptable workflow. How are we going to have a randomized clinical trial showing that it can impact clinical outcomes? Are we going to train the next generation of students? Are we going to ensure that there's going to be appropriate reimbursement for this? It's not just a casual telephone conversation with a physician. Oommen, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you so much, Dr. Anil. Before I go to that question, I'll just jump back one step and address the question that you first asked. So are we going to see Amazonization or Flipkartization of healthcare? or a particular cardiology. One thing that we have to keep in mind that behind that application that we have in the hand to order something on Amazon or on Flipkart is a huge man and machine muscle. Okay, they have large warehouses. They are primarily not e-tailers. They are data science companies. So the way they maximize their profit is based on data science. And if we can bring that into healthcare, then we will see value. So I'll give an example of Max Hospitals. They have some form of electronic health records in collaboration with Deakin University. They did some analytics, particularly on, let's say, post myocardial infarction readmission rates. And then they came up with predictive scores as to who are the people who are at maximum risk of a 30-day readmission. So if we are able to embed some of these things into the clinical workflows, then we will be able to show value to clinicians, and then them adopting electronic health records and seeing. So meaningful use is about actually providing clinicians with insights. So to answer your question, so are our current day clinicians or the future set of clinicians been given orientation on electronic health records? So when is the first time somebody who is a medical graduate or a postgraduate who is coming out, or let's say somebody who's qualified in cardiology or cardiovascular surgery, when is the first time they actually interact with the electronic health record? Perhaps only when they come into private practice. Before that, they are hardly exposed to it. If we have somebody who's gone through training for 10, 12 years without having touched a computer or electronic health records, how do we expect them to adopt empathy? First thing I would say is to actually have this incorporated in the curriculum. The Medical Council of India is already, or NMC as it is currently, is trying to look at this. One good thing in the Indian context as it's happening is that in August, the Prime Minister announced the National Digital Health Mission. And as part of this, we should hope that some of this will get translated. So it is a very ambitious plan to actually have electronic health records, at least to begin with some form of a health ID that will help connect. So even if it is just laboratory report, ultrasound reports, or let's say angio reports and laboratory investigations, they are all linked to a particular unique ID. And if through technology they are able to link all this and provide to a clinician this information in a structured manner, then we would probably be starting the first steps towards something called an electronic medical record. Electronic health record is much more complex. So I will step back and stop here.
Thank you so much for giving us this background. But you know, there are a lot of barriers. Unlike in the US, where it's impossible to get the mobile number of your physician, in India, the first thing which a physician wants is your mobile number. And when he comes to consult you. And the next thing is that he gets a report from any lab chain. And the first thing he does is he does not even open that report. He will just put it on a PDF and he will forward that on your WhatsApp. So, and everybody thinks that this is something which is continuation of care. We have to get this organized. We have to get this. So all the stakeholders, whether it is, we all know that the market is growing, but all the stakeholders, whether it is the patient, whether it is the caregiver, whether it is the physician, have to move about this in a mature fashion, because the same professional and ethical norms as mandated by the telemedicine guideline, with the same seriousness, with a lot of emphasis on clinical judgment, need to be brought in so that we can create a problem-oriented medical record or an appropriate medical record, have a diagnosis, have an e-prescription, have some seamless escalation if required for an emergency guideline, for an emergency consultation. But there are many challenges. One is that no healthcare or no treatment is complete without the involvement of a pharmacy. Pharmacies have many challenges in our country because we know that pharmacy is not even controlled by the National Medical Council or the Medical Council of India, and they can misutilize the data for their personal advantages. Many platforms have developed. There is an issue of network or digital literacy. There is a dependence on the network itself, which may not be very robust in many areas. Many people think of it as just a video game. So we need to put all this together and think through. For example, here's my friend Tejas, who actually did a telerobotic angioplasty 20 miles from Apex Heart Institute. Now, it was done under special license. It is not legal. but really a robotic PCI and acute stroke intervention is work in progress, and maybe we'll get there one day. But cardiology, and this is where I would like all the eminent cardiologists to come in. Do you think it is suitable for telemedicine? Because we do have a set of urgencies and emergencies which need to be seen, and the escalation has to be quick. However, the clinical data set is pretty much standard. History, you can sort out a history even on listening to a patient, even through a video call or through a phone call. And very often this is what we are doing, because there are only 5 cardinal symptoms of heart disease: angina, dyspnea, palpitation, fatigue, and syncope. But even in our usually trained cardiologists may not be very good at physical examination, a point which Atul was trying to make. And there are some salient features which can be easily recorded and transmitted. So can I have any volunteer, a senior cardiologist like Atul or Nishith or Dr. Mohanan, who can comment on this, and then we move on to the next bit?
See, Anil, the patient's history is usually gives me 80% of the clues as to what he's suffering from. If you listen very carefully to the patient, he'll really tell you by the sequence of events, the natural history of his problems, and the way he describes it. And based on that, you can plan out the further investigations. So maybe an initial contact on a digital medium where at least you are able to guide rightly. You may not be able to clinch the final diagnosis. You may need a physical presence for certain investigations. But to a large extent, the initial screening can successfully be done on a digital platform.
Great.
So, yeah, so if I may say that if in medicine, any branch which is more suitable for cardiology or telemedicine is cardiology, because the first investigation of choice, what we seek, is a 12-lead ECG, and that determines the emergency and non-emergency of a situation. So, and cardiology is one branch where we say that time is muscle. So every time, every second lost means myocardium loss. So here, this is the speed with which we can diagnose an MI, the speed with which we can diagnose ventricular tachycardia can only be done by a robust telecardiology system. And the advent of wearables like Apple Watch and the Fitbits, they have really made it so easy. The last weekend, I have diagnosed a person suffering from VT, and I immediately asked him to come to our emergency unit. And that was through his Apple Watch. So cardiology is the best suited branch because most of our diagnosis, as Ranjit has said, that it's based on electrocardiogram. So we are basically poised, but unfortunately, the penetration of this wearables is still very low in India as compared to the Western world.
There are reasons. So they can be sometimes which we tell our students that there is no substitute for a clinical examination. But then, and clinical examination used to be kind of exciting once upon a time. Then unfortunately, the stethoscope took away that excitement. And now, as Sujeeth pointed out, we have digital stethoscopes and stemoscopes which are available. There's a lot of virtual examination which we can do, but there are novel technologies which are still being developed. The basic architecture has to be robust to integrate, and the data acquisition technician capability is still suspect. So we need to see whether we can implement it. And just like everybody discussed, Takuya Ayagi actually died during the coronavirus pandemic, and he's the guy who made a simple thing like a pulse oximeter, and we now have improvised tele-ICUs which can be put, especially during the corona times when people did not want to come to hospitals. Decompensated heart failures were being managed at home with tele-ICUs, but I'm sure there's a discussion thereafter on tele-ICU in this meeting. So the pandemic which we've had has not just been a coronavirus pandemic, but has been a pandemic of wearables and IoT devices. And we all have these fancy things like the Apple Watch, we have digital stethoscopes, and so many things which are now available. So, and we've all diagnosed atrial fibrillations, we've all diagnosed even ST elevations on this technology. So this is largely for point of care or ambulatory monitoring. In both ways, it kind of works. Yesterday, there was somebody who brought a device to my office which said that you put it under the bed and it also kind of records the stress level of a patient. I did not know how to quantify stress in any case. So these are devices which can be either in the form of watches, patches, smartphones, headbands, eyeglasses, necklaces, and there are some biosensing wearables which are now available. So can I get Ranjit's buy-in on how he sees this pandemic of wearables and these new toys and gadgets, how they are developing?
So Anil, once again, thanks for inviting me. What is going to come in the future is hard to predict. There'll be many more refined wearables before this decade is over. But let's talk about what we have, what we've used in 2020. The first is, my remarks do not focus on acute cardiovascular emergencies. You cannot triage STEMI, syncope appropriately in the acute setting. So this is not for acute cardiology, it's more for subacute or preferably chronic cardiovascular conditions for now. Having said that, we were using 6-lead EKGs, not 12, but 6-lead on the Cardia 6L system to look at rhythm, to look at the QT interval, and in some people having chest pain in the COVID pandemic, looking for ST elevation. So that's already here. And that's beyond, it's much more refined than the Apple Watch. We use the Apple Watch too, but it has many limitations of false positives, not being accurately able to look at the QT and ST segment shifts. So that's one piece. The second is, I want to interject and say you don't need to wait for an electronic medical record to practice good telemedicine today. And I'll give you an example of somebody we had at a global town hall on COVID about 10 days ago, Dr. Anil Dhall. He's an L-batcher. He's managed about 1,000 patients in Gurgaon with COVID between a pulse oximeter, his cell phone, temperature monitoring, and the Apple Watch or some equivalent thereof. I'll also give you my personal experience, and maybe you should have this physician present to your group, Dr. Gagan Sani, who was the director of cardiac oncology, and she, along with about 6 people we managed at home, they refused to come to the hospital with COVID pneumonia. And on my text, I have the list. I just texted her to see what she had. She had a pulse oximeter, home blood pressure monitor, digital thermometer, an Apple Watch. She actually had the Cardia device. We did have to send somebody in with an oxygen concentrator, and one of our physicians went in when we were so concerned about managing COVID and not having enough PPE and started IV fluids on her. But I think the point I'm making is that the electronic medical record will make data management easier. You'll be able to pull this up on your phone, but I think you can practice very good telemedicine. Obviously, you won't have the ability to get ultrasound images and refine your diagnosis of valvular heart disease, but between history and these physiologic signals, you can make a lot of advances. The last point I want to make is SYMPOSIUM is a sensor that's skin-based that National Health, the NHS has been using to manage COVID patients from home. And I think in one of your slides, you have the digital Band-Aid from Imperial College of London, which gives you temperature, respiration, an EKG. It gives you a lot of information. So I think telemedicine is here, and it can be practiced with some innovation, creativity, especially in the middle of a pandemic.
Great, Ajit. So I'm really going to move on because we are going to be short of time, but a lot of emphasis now during the pandemic also came on point of care ultrasound. And we have with us Charith, who's actually worked on trying to create, I think they've already got the pilot devices, despite I do not know how they're going to get through the PCP and DT regulations in our country. But these are going to be tablet-based devices, and I think his device is going to be called this Echo Naus or from Cosmos. And I would really like to know from him how he's going to integrate a step further in cardiac diagnosis, which is using echo. Charith?
Thanks, Anil sir. And the pandemic has brought out a lot of challenges. Firstly, access to cardiologists. What we saw were patients were far more comfortable to go to a local community center, their own physician, a diagnostic center, than come to a hospital simply because of the fear of COVID. And the idea is that can we as the cardiology community extend our reach to the patients back at the primary care level or the diagnostic chain. So what we have done is we've partnered with majority of the point of care ultrasound providers, and thanks for the picture of the Cosmos. This is an FDA approved device. And what we have done is that the data from the device, of course, gets uploaded using AI. Initial set of diagnoses are done, and that is sent to the cardiologist, pretty much like a hub and spoke for MIs, but this is for heart failure, valves, etc. So that you can be at your center and then reach out to either new patients or follow-up patients, both in terms of structural heart disease as well as heart failure. And I do believe that those are just like tech companies who are able to go digital will survive the long term, COVID or not in the future. It'll be.
We have to think of this as our efficiency amplifiers, not as being competitive. And this is the Band-Aid which Ranjit had mentioned. So there are a lot of IoT devices, optical, voice, patient engagement, which can actually be used. But I'm going to come to, because we're going to run short of time, so I'm going to come to some specific issues. And the first two issues are back with Ranjit, because they deal with the home monitoring advances and cybersecurity issues. So we were all very worried whether a head of state who has a device can be, sorted out. And we've had some heads of states who want heads to roll by interfering with their devices. So really, Ranjit, your comments on home monitoring, how it has changed your perspective, how it's changed the ecosystem and cybersecurity.
So it's funny you mention heads rolling and heads of state, because that's what prompted us to write this paper on cybersecurity, and I'll post that in your group. It was in October. I think that illustration is from our paper.
Yeah.
And it was an episode of Homeland, which is where they assassinate the vice president of the United States. A terrorist group hacks into his pacemaker. It looks like a Medtronic pacemaker from the device that they show in the movie. And that was one issue. The second was when Dick Cheney, when he was vice president, when they were going to replace his ICD, the Secret Service asked for his remote monitoring capability to be disabled by the manufacturer, by Medtronic, and because they felt it was a security threat. So those are the things that got us interested in writing this paper. And I'll post the link for the paper. It was published in October this year in Heart Rhythm Journal, on some of the things that you should be thinking about. And I think to do a deep dive, short of time, you may just want to post the link to the paper. But it's a concern. It's a concern for regulators. It's a concern for manufacturers, patients, physicians. And what we propose are white hacker hackathons to bring out the vulnerabilities, to take the manufacturers out of the piece, because they don't want these to be exposed. They want you to think their devices are secure. And only if we have a consortium of patients, physicians, regulators, professional societies, and manufacturers working together to make them secure will you really get that level of security. Because as you know, Anil, anything can be hacked.
That's correct. And the problem, one of the problems with home monitoring has been the laws of the land, and which actually do not permit medical data to be transferred across the boundaries. I do not know in these days of cloud connectivity how that's going to change. For example, I know that all the Biotronic devices, home monitoring, because I think Biotronic introduced home monitoring first in India, all the Biotronic devices go to Berlin. and that was a question we asked them. So I do not know, because although India is not really a HIPAA or signatory, but we do have some norms in place regarding patient data and confidentiality. So I'm not sure as to how this is going to work out. Would Oommen or Manick like to comment on that? Or Ashwini, if he's there, because I've discussed this with him in the past. No, he's not there.
So Anil sir, I'll quickly take a crack at answering that from a limited perspective.
Yeah, I'm there, Anil. Yeah. On the listening watch. Sorry, I got distracted for a moment. Yeah, somebody was answering that. Please go ahead.
Yeah. No, go ahead. Go ahead, Ashwini sir.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. You are more capable than I am as far as this is concerned.
So, Anil sir, the good part is that the government of India has now tabled regulations to be on par with the European GDPR level of security, both for the patient and setting out rules that would protect the patient's data. And GDPR being far more stringent than even those from the HIPAA perspective.
Yeah, so carrying on from Charit, you see the status of the bill. Actually, it is still a bill. After the B.N. Sri Krishna Commission deliberated upon the security and privacy aspects of data and security privacy, the Parliament is yet to convert it into a bill. So as yet, possibly those stringent laws and those statutes have not come into play as yet. But I'm told possibly in the very near future, the bill would be converted into the act. And that is where we will have one of the most secure acts which would be concerned with the data and security privacy in India. Is there any other?
Is telling us we can remotely monitor battery status. We also can monitor. And Ranjit, have you used a lot of CardioMEMS for heart failure? So have you had patients in whom you've been able to forewarn them for increasing their diuretic dosage based on CardioMEMS reports?
CardioMEMS is a little more invasive, and oftentimes these patients already have defibrillators in place. So we found, at least with the Boston Scientific devices, nocturnal heart rate, patient activity, transthoracic impedance, which is the impedance between the shocking cord and the can, to be almost as good as CardioMEMS. There's no question that CardioMEMS gives you earlier detection. So if you've got brittle patients, perhaps that's the way to go. We have over 50 patients with CardioMEMS devices. But I just wanted to go back to that last point. The barrier for you, of course, you'll get the laws passed, and you'll get ways to get the data to move. The biggest barrier to adoption of remote monitoring devices is reimbursement. So Germany, which has Biotronic and has great home monitoring systems in place, has reimbursement, but all the neighboring countries don't. So unless the doctors get paid and the health system gets paid, it's very difficult to adopt a new technology because the money doesn't add up. So you need to lobby simultaneously for reimbursement so that you can move the field forward.
So unfortunately, medicine is a holy cow in India, and it's very difficult to lobby, because physicians are supposed to be people who are not, but we're not going to go into that kind of a setup. I think Ranjit has already discussed a large amount of the schema of remote monitoring and how we can integrate a large amount of internal and external sensors in heart failure patients. Now let me, because Nishith started with this, I don't know if Ajit has joined us. Ajit, are you there?
Anil, may I ask a question if the panel, if you permit?
Yeah.
So I came in a little late. I don't know whether this issue has been addressed or not. All of you are very tech-savvy cardiologists and very eminent cardiologists at that. So I know Nishith has been engaged in so many innovative pursuits, and Ranjit also has, I think, mentioned a little bit about this. My issue is, like, people like me who are not cardiologists, what could be the minimum essential set of devices for me or a person like me to handle cardiac emergencies in the COVID scenario and maybe thereafter? So is there some kind of what in IT we call a minimum data set? So do you have some kind of a minimum device set?
See, this is a work in progress. I will just answer that very briefly. This is work in progress, depending on the toys which are available to us. And as of now, if we can have a very simple thing like a blood pressure, a pulse, a saturation, we get done with a large amount of work. If we also have something which can record an EKG in a simple manner, and we have very many devices, the Cardia, the Apple Watch, and I know that there are some more cell phone manufacturers which are going to come up with a very fancy device, but we are not at liberty to really talk about it just now. But these are all devices. I think the competition is getting intense in this tech space. So maybe in a couple of years from now, we will have something which can record pulse, BP, which can record the ECG, and that should, as Nishith said, sort out a large amount of what we actually need. Now,
so I saw Atul raising his hand. Possibly he wanted to come up with something.
So,
yeah.
See, and just triggered by your question, I think the direction which we are moving in, there is the convergence of devices in all fields, and sooner or later we would probably have one maybe implantable or one wearable device to take care of
Can the other microphones be kept on mute?
Blood monitoring and other things.
There is some background noise. Please kindly mute your mics.
Yeah.
Somebody's microphone is on.
This is the point which I was trying to make. Just like so, we have to give seriousness to this effort. And Atul very rightly said, we are looking at. I mean, a lot of people have looked at one tablet or one phone integrated device which could do a lot of this function, including take blood pressure, including take respiratory rate, including take including we were trying on a device for National Rural Health Mission, which could actually go with the ambulances. We've got a lot of these ambulances, but we don't have adequate devices, and we don't have adequate people at the back end to interpret or have escalation matrices with these devices. So yes, you're right. We are going to have a lot of these simple devices in place where a lot of data can be simplified and made user-friendly for the physician. So,
Anil, can I have Nishith's views on this? Whatever I just asked, I know he has been working on some devices. I would like to hear something about that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, so thanks, Ashwini. Actually, now, as far as your question, now we basically measure the pulse rate, blood pressure, temperature, and oxygenation. So now there are lots of plethora of devices which do that. There is no, but what we need is a standardization. There are hundreds of such devices which are coming up, but by different manufacturers, but they don't talk to each other. There is no common platform on which. So the need of our through this cardiology conference is that, and especially Ashwini, so that if we bring a standardized aspect of reporting and interpretation, that will help us and put in a grid-like structure in the national health telecardiology or telemedicine mission. So this is my second thing which I wanted to convey through this august audience is that there is a lot of gap between the clinician's demand as well as what a software personnel he develops in his sitting in his office. So the collaboration between a clinician and a the software developer or device developer is lacking. He comes out with a very detailed device, but on the clinical side, on the bedside, it is not of much use to clinicians. So that collaboration is missing. The third is whenever we clinician give an idea to these software technologists, they usually run away with our ideas. That is what has happened with me. So there should be some mechanism by the government and some common body which can give us a platform to develop and nurture our ideas safely without getting the risk of intellectual property right being stolen.
Yes. So, in fact, sorry, Anil, I slightly hijacked your agenda. I had a selfish interest in asking this question. Oommen John is here.
I was going to ask Oommen to tell us a little bit about the National Digital Health Policy.
Yeah, no, just a second, because you see, Oommen and I, we are members of a committee at the Bureau of Indian Standards, wherein I am chairing the committee, and we have been tasked to define standards for telehealth in India. Now, the interest that I had in asking this question was to, have the views of this August Assembly. Possibly we can touch base. Oommen, kindly ensure that we have their views a little later upon the standard that we are trying to define. And cardiology is one of the premier clinical disciplines where considering the NCDs and all that. So maybe we would like to have their opinion with people like Anil Dhall and Nishith and Atul and all these people who are Sujeeth.
Everyone here, sir. They are
everybody.
Ashwini, can I make a suggestion? That this kind of thing, we can actually request the president of the Cardiological Society of India, who is with us,
absolutely,
to actually dedicate a subcommittee subsequently, wherein we can actually go and make some guidelines for this.
Yes. All right. Possibly, Oommen, possibly what we can do is, if we can have some kind of guideline from the Cardiological Society of India, and we can incorporate one of the members. Like I have the prerogative to co-opt a member, so possibly they can the president can delegate somebody, and we can co-opt them one by one, the various clinical specialties. Think over it.
Thank you.
So just a moment. If you remember our conversation earlier, we talked about this having some form of an NCD alliance, and this will come as a topper in our program. No questions about that. And people like that we had here who are so erudite on these matters, we can definitely go ahead with these proposals.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So you have the cooperation of the Cardiological Society, which brings us to a very important project, which is a very important project. I think Ajit is still involved on the other side, but this was a project which started wherein prompt evacuation, prompt diagnosis of STEMI patients was being done. If Ajit has joined us, I don't think Ajit is here, but Nishith, would you like to tell everybody about the STEMI India project?
So basically, I don't know much the details about it, but this is a project.
Sir, can I volunteer?
You may be able to tell.
Sir, can I volunteer?
Yeah, Manokar. Yeah, you can. Please.
Manokar can.
Yes, sir, this is a project initiated by Dr. Ajit in Chennai. So the basic concept is what is called as the hub and spoke model. So the concept is people who are in centers where there are not sufficient facilities to do a primary PCA, but the system is in place, especially in semi-urban and rural areas where they are all tied up to one center. So what is done is, for example, I'll give you a simple example. If somebody is in a rural part of, say, Coimbatore, so definitely for him to reach Coimbatore for a primary PCA will take him more than 2 hours. So the concept is that as soon as the patient comes, the ECG is shared with the cardiologist in Coimbatore. The cardiologist instructs the physician in Coimbatore to go ahead with thrombolysis. At the same time, he is preparing himself to handle the situation if thrombolysis fails. So the concept is like the patient is thrombolized, and then subsequently shifted to Coimbatore in an 108 ambulance, so that in case even if the thrombolysis is successful or it is failed thrombolysis, this patient can be in time for a rescue PCI to be performed at, say, KMCH Coimbatore, which is one of the hub of the hub and spoke model. So this has been done at various institutes across the state. In Chennai, there are 4 centers. Similarly, in other places, there are other centers. The concept is pre-hospital thrombolysis for more. Pre-hospital means primary PCI capable hospital. So, and then subsequently shifted on to this thing, but at all points of time, based on transmission of ECG through WhatsApp or direct to the physician treating the patient is always in the loop, as well as the interventional cardiologist responsible for that patient is also in the loop. So that is how this model works, and they have published really good papers on this, both at the national and international level, about how early thrombolysis is equivalent, or what we call as a pharmacoinvasive strategy, to be equivalent to a primary PCI strategy in a setup like ours. So that's the basic concept of this program. Dr. Ajit and Dr. Thomas Alexander from Coimbatore have been the
That was very nicely put. You have not let us miss Ajit. It would have been nice to have him here. But this is a technology piece. The technology piece was ECG capability, ECG transmission. There was a transportation piece, and that was provided by these emergency ambulances. And there was a provision of pre-hospital or pre-STEMI center capable thrombolysis and pharmacoinvasive strategy. And it has also had a lot of blessings from the administration and government to make it possible. So this has been probably one of the success stories which we can attribute to the beginning of telecardiology. I would like Charit to tell us a little bit about the Tricog ecosystem, because they are also developing a similar STEMI project. I think they've already implemented it in a small village state called Goa. But I would like to hear from Charit.
Thank you, sir. And what we have done is we have connected 4,000 clinics, hospitals, nursing homes around India, and enabled them via telemedicine for diagnosis of ST elevation myocardial infarction. And this is done with a turnaround time of less than 6 minutes. Then the next is that we connect them to the closest tertiary care center of their choice, or a secondary care center where they can be thrombolized or sent for primary angioplasty. And this has had phenomenal success here in India. And it goes to show the importance of telemedicine, that where a few of us doctors can extend our coverage and help the vast number of patients in this country. So we've crossed 4.5 million patients in India, and over 150,000 acute coronary syndromes have been diagnosed since our start in 2015.
Thank you. And we are trying to get the Delhi government to actually acknowledge this to the Mohalla clinics and also in every place. Actually put up a project, and let's hope it sees the light of day. I would like to get Sujeeth here, because he's been largely quiet, for his comments so far, and also to tell us a little bit about these multitude of apps which have developed, including his app, which is like a click-to-clinic app, so that we...
Dr. Dhall got disconnected.
So maybe Sujeeth can take over.
Sujeeth. Yeah, sure. So yeah, we were talking, I had some notes if we go back into our routine workflow. So there should be a differentiation when cardiologist is thinking about his patients, divide them into outpatient practice and inpatient practice. Looking at the outpatient practice, you have a new patient and a follow-up patient. So what I'm doing right now is, for all new patients, I'm making sure that they're coming to the office, have all the PPE ready. The reason is you get to know the patients face to face, get to know them so that a rapport gets built up, and then I'm trying to do whatever follow-ups as an outpatient remotely. So if you look at that, what are the data sets that you require? Like blood pressure, a heart rate, pulse oximeter, a
Hello?
weighing scale to get the weights.
You got disconnected.
And if they are diabetics, if somebody is looking interested into blood glucose, you know. And then if you look at it, there are different players coming up with their own apps. Like, you know, Apple has their 2-lead EKG. Now the patients come in and say, you know, I have my EKG, what should I do? I can't do anything about it. I tell my patients, I don't know why Apple created this. What am I going to do with it? So everybody is working in silos. There is no unifying theme there. So what am I going to do? I'll tell you from my experience. We have a click-to-clinic health manager. We created an application, mobile application for the US market, and integrated all the devices, whatever we mentioned, digital devices. The moment the patient checks that, gets into our manager app. And then we tried to integrate that into a practice. When we tried to do a proof of concept, we went into the EMR. And the EMR for one practice asked us $40,000 as a licensing fee to give an API for their EMR. That just takes actually a day's work for our technologist, right? So there is no mandate for an EMR player to open their program to other third-party sources. So that's where the innovation is being burned in the United States. So the big players have that, you know, the command of the market because EMR is mandated. So taking that experience, when we are doing the home healthcare in India, you know, we came up with a patient application and then a provider application. And whatever we are doing it in the personal health record part of it. So the data, whatever the data that we are going to store, the patient's digital data, it's going to be in the patient application. That way you're not worried about data breach, data privacy issues coming in. And if you look at it, Apple is working towards overcoming the EMR with the personal health record concept. You never know, we might be leading into a point wherein first PHR will take over the EMR. And that is where I'm thinking is going to go. Dr. Chandra just mentioned, we have multiple applications, multiple companies coming up with digital devices. We don't know what to do. Dr. Suri alluded to the fact that, I'm an interventional cardiologist and also device specialist. I have so many patients with pacemakers and defibrillators. I get their thoracic impedances every single day as an alert. What am I going to do with it? Unless there is a structured reimbursement involved in it. If it is a third-party player, you need to come up with a package for it. And then, there's only so much a particular person can do. If you are bombarded with this multiple millions and zillions of data sets, what is the treating doctor going to do? So we are dealing with, I think, data implosion. And then we need to figure out what is the minimum viable data that we need in vis-a-vis telehealth in order to come up and overcome the challenges that we're facing, is my spiel on that.
So Ashwini, why don't you take over since Dr. Dhall is not, I think, some technical glitch. Ashwini, are you there? I can see you.
So, a word on these new aggregators. Would anybody like to make a comment on the new aggregators which have come up in the healthcare and including cardiology?
Yeah, so a very, very good point raised by Dr. Mathur is these commercial aggregators like Practo, like Librate, and they are mushroomed, and there is an explosion of these during this pandemics. And they have set their own rules. They have started exploiting the doctors. So again, the need of our from this telemedicine council is, Ashwini, I think you are listening, to regulate these aggregators. So they should not be exploiting the doctors as well as the patients for their commercial pursuits.
Sir, I think Dr. Ashwini is on a call, so he's not able to unmute, but I want to completely agree with what you have said. And during the inaugural of this conference, we had Dr. V.K. Paul from Niti Aayog, who exactly said this. We have launched the telemedicine practice guidelines. This does not mean that we just have the playing field open out there for anybody to exploit the doctors or the patients, because the prima facie what the guiding principle of the telemedicine practice guidelines is embedded in the trust factor between a patient who is seeking care and the provider. Telemedicine is just a platform. Therefore, I think it is about time that we healthcare professionals take control of this whole area, because primarily it is a transaction, not a transaction, it is a trust relationship, and it is care that is delivered over a medium. So, sirs, we are with you, and Telemedicine Society. I would, now that Ashwini sir is free, he would endorse the point that you mentioned. Ashwini sir, it's over to you about the need for trust and building trust, and Telemedicine Society ensuring that that is maintained.
I think Anil and Ashwini both are struggling with their...
No, I am back.
You're back? Okay.
Yeah.
So Anil, you picked up a point on aggregators in your...
Yeah, so I'm actually, I have got them point listed, you know. Before that, I just wanted to make a small comment on the fact that when we get so much of data, we probably will be able to get social determinants of lifestyle diseases, because a Kindle may be able to read us better than, if we've read 2.5 books on Kindle, it probably reads us better than our mother. So there are many limitations and challenges. Sensitization of the clientele is a very major challenge, because most of our patients, and just like Ranjit was trying to make a point, is that very many patients also think of it as a very casual conversation in India. Unlike in the US, where they can get regulatories to work and reimbursements to work, here if a person takes your phone number, he thinks he can call you at whatever time, and because you're in a noble profession and because healthcare is a holy cow, it becomes very easy. So we need to clearly define responsibilities of patients, caregivers, and physicians. We have to make a mature clinical experience which is as good as a physical interaction, and we should be able to share data much more than what we have done. We've already discussed data review, structured disease reporting, national digital health mission, which is going to come. But really, none of the media transfers is truly designed for telemedicine, and we have a lot of wish lists. The current platforms are inadequate. We could do with voice to type text, handwriting to type text. We could do with seamless DICOM upload. Physician handwriting has been legendary, that it is never legible. Abbreviations are non-standard. We need to keep all record keeping actually legal, and decision formulation legally binding, and we need to have efficient workflow. But for this, like we said, we have got a lot of these aggregators and suppliers which are available. And National Digital Health Mission is a fairly inclusive thing. So the benefit of aggregators and platform is, one of the biggest problems is that they own the media. They are run by non-physicians who have got really commercial objectives, or they are run by hospital chains. They control the payment gateways. They control the payment monitoring. There is an issue of data privacy and data sharing with pharma providers or aggregators, which I think is a very major issue. When pharma themselves want to get involved with telemedicine, or they want to partner with e-pharmacy aggregators, it could not be with the sole objective of doing free service. I mean, they are going to look at data mining in a big way. And what about things like insurance payment and telemarketing? Because many of these aggregators and platforms, and I would really welcome Atul's comments on this, have controlled the Google AdWord marketing by ticket sales, and they are thereafter, they are controlling the telemarketing, and they are controlling even the patient traffic. So I really think that the role of aggregators and platforms needs to be judiciously examined, needs to be standardized. And there are many challenges with them. and they have a liability for inappropriate data misuse. But before that, I would like a comment from Atul and maybe a comment from Dr. Mohanan.
I am this issue of teleaggregators is not for the future. It is already here. It's facing us, and a lot of our colleagues have had bad experiences with these teleaggregator companies, and you can very clearly sense the sinister intentions. And this does not hold good for the future for both the doctors as well as for the patients, like Anil has highlighted. And it is time that the rules have to be set to determine and control these teleaggregators, as they have been done in so many other fields. Otherwise, it will be like fighting for a lost cause. So there is a sense of urgency in trying to deal with this and trying to regulate these teleaggregators as quickly as we should.
Dr. Mohanan, sir.
I just want to echo what Atul has said. We have to have some appropriateness criteria when we use this telemedicine. And I definitely look forward to working with the Europe so that we can do something and send it across to our members.
Manohar, you want to say something?
Yes, sir. Actually, this is very, very important, sir, because I was in another platform where dermatologists were there. And apparently all these telehealth aggregators do a lot of data mining. So they gave an example that patient had come for some hair removal treatment, and he was advised the treatment, and as soon as that patient left the consultant's room, patient gets a message from the telehealth promoter saying that you have been advised this treatment, but it is available at 50% of the cost, 200 meters from where you are. So, so much of data penetration mining is done, and patient was offered the number of another dermatologist who is offering the same treatment at 50% of the cost. So this is a huge kind of,
I think we would start by saying, physician, heal thyself. It is our personal greed which comes in the way of our collective need. Collectively we are different, but we all want individually, and we all know these challenges on a day-to-day basis. But I think we need to have regulation in place which can control this. And also the point which Nishith brought out, I really liked it, is that we give a lot of suggestions on device development to a lot of vendors, and there is no real incubator protection mechanism in our country. So a lot of these vendors come back to you after 8 months and said, you had given a suggestion, I have now converted it into a device and I have commercialized it. And you realize that, hello, this is what started in my room or my office, and there was a particular high-ticket device which we had initiated. We had got everything done, and finally to find that the newspaper article had some other colleagues' names, etc., figuring on it. So I think these are important issues which we need to address. So the European Society, and this is particularly for Dr. Mohanan, has actually come up with a working group position paper on how to overcome challenges in digital cardiovascular care, and they are trying to overcome this problem. We need to also talk to the NMC to integrate digital health into the curriculum so that there are considerations of the current landscape and future developments. I joined a hospital many years ago which had no handwritten records. It had only digital records, and I found that I am all thumbs when it comes to typing. When we were in our romantic years, we used to write long letters by hand. We never wrote WhatsApp messages or typed emails. So I think we need to. Many people of our generation are still a little shy to type, and we need to have things like voice-to-type text, which have been developed but which need integration so that these barriers can be removed. And if this starts early, if we start by inculcating this, and if we inculcate record keeping much earlier in the medical curriculum, and we make it mandatory, then our data keeping and record keeping will also improve. So we have to build it into the curriculum. So a digitized cardiovascular physician visit, and this is from I think it was from New England Journal a few years ago from Jack, could have all this built in, a voice recognition software, maybe a handheld ultrasound, smartphone, ECG, automated clinical decision support tools. And I did not actually bring that because that would be increasing the scope of our discussion today. Medical grade wearable sensors and improved performance and patient feedback so that we actually improve our efficiency. And I've actually come to my last slide because we need to actually improve our access to care, decrease readmissions, improve clinical outcomes, and improve value of care. And we can only do this if we have a good platform to facilitate teleconsultation, which is like a formal virtual interface, which is modular, expandable with digital record keeping software, making it easy for the doctor to save records as the visit goes. The record keeping will enable future growth in AI diagnosis. So I want to just open this with a with comments of wisdom from all the panelists on the do's and don'ts for telecardiology, because our time was over about 15 minutes ago. But do's and don'ts, I would like to ask Manokar to start with the do's and don'ts. What do we think should be the do's and don'ts for a physician in telecardiology practice?
So we can start off with CSI formulating a list of things that are allowed in telecardiology and what are things which are not allowed. So we can, as Dr. Sujeeth pointed out, a very important point: no new consultations on telemedicine to start off with. So that's, I think, can be a first statement.
No, I think you can have an escalation matrix built in. It should not be the no new consultation. We have picked up, like Nishith pointed out, we have picked up ventricular tachycardias, we picked up STEMIs on new consultations. It doesn't really matter. But we must know our limits. We must know when to escalate to an emergency consultation. And the telemedicine guidelines are pretty much robust, and they give, but they put a focus on something called judgment, and judgment is a very nebulous term. Atul?
Yeah, just a short interjection on my side. Let me just surprise you all that, see, telemedicine practice guidelines have got the built-in mandate to review the guidelines in a very in the offing, you know. So I would request, just like the Psychiatry Society and the people from NIMHANS did, you know, there was a restriction on the use of benzodiazepines. Then it was felt that this is a drug which is essential to the practice of psychiatry, and so it was communicated to the then Board of Governors, MCI, and shortly thereafter, certain essential drugs in psychiatry were permitted in the telemedicine practice guideline. So I would submit to Dr. Mohanan as the president of the CSI, and with the consult of the rest of the eminent people over here, if you could, you know, have a board wherein you can, if you consider certain medicines essential, which could be used in a teleconsult under the overarching umbrella of the telemedicine practice guidelines, I think that should be a very good effort.
You know, Ashwini, the IMA is fighting mixopathy. The IMA is fighting mixopathy. We are on the horns of a dilemma. We have not given levels of care.
This is something different from mixopathy. I'm only requesting the people from CSI to formulate a minimum set of medicines which can be utilized for the benefit.
We have been trying to fight for many years that people who are not qualified as cardiologists also address themselves as cardiologists. Let
us look for the future. Yeah. And see, my motto is never give up. Never give up. You know, if just something like this can be forthcoming, we can, you yourself can communicate to the board of to the NMC, and I'm sure something good can come out of it. We have to make this document, which you yourself just now said is a very robust document. So we have to make the document more and more enabling. There are certain restrictions right now in the document. Oommen, you want to say something?
I just want to respond to Dr. Anil's point, where as one component of the National Health Mission, what is happening is also a registry of healthcare providers. So as much as a health ID is also a registry. So we could make a proposal to the National Digital Health Mission saying that certain or primarily cardiological focused interventions and drugs that are administered over telemedicine should have the registered cardiologist. And because there is a registry, you can restrict who can prescribe or who cannot prescribe.
So, Oommen, actually, the Medical Council of India registering your postgraduate and your super specialty qualifications was for this purpose.
Yeah.
But we have lost our way. Atul, you were saying something.
Sorry, me?
Atul, yeah, you were saying
Okay, yeah. So I will just summarize what my thoughts are. Telemedicine is definitely like a double-edged sword. And we need to harness the advantages. And it is very important for the clinicians to deep dive into this field so that they can at least create a more practical field and where you can find a balance between the ethics as well as the technology. So this is how my take-home message would be.
Nishith?
So now, just before coming to the summary, I just want to, because this is a very important stage where CSI president is also there. Now, since too much emphasis is given on ECG, tele-ECG, and as Dr. Anil has said, that point of care ultrasound, especially the echocardiography, is now machines are there, but the biggest stumbling block is the PCP-NDT Act. Now, if the CSI can implore and the Telemedicine Council also implore the government that they should absolve the cardiologist from this act, because they are not determining the sex. So, because echo and point of care echo is equally important in distinguishing between acute MI, pericardial effusion, tamponade dissection, and a lot of things which will delay. So this is a very, very long pending demand. If the CSI president can implore and the Telemedicine Council can implore the government to basically absolve us from this PCP-NDT Act.
Great point. Dr. Mohanan, sir.
Okay. Thanks for all those inputs. And I think I will work on a couple of things, Anil. We should again, from our part, we should also impress upon the patients on the, of course, clinical examination is ritualistic, we know, but we should tell them about the limitations of that and the other avenues now be available. As everybody said, the National Digital Mission, I hope, for more and more of the solve the problem of EMR in a sizable way. We were talking about the security part, the appropriateness at length. So that also has to be definitely dealt with. And finally, we, along with the Telemedicine Council, we should definitely will come out with a position paper. Anil has been in the forefront of it even earlier, before the pandemic, and with all your helping hands, I'm sure we can do. I am not here to say that. I will never ever say that CSI's hold on the policy makers is tremendous, but I can very well see the passion amongst you that we could do something good.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Ranjit, if you're there, some comments regarding this discussion today?
I think it's here to be adopted. What will happen is that market forces will push legislation and patients will embrace it. And it's a function of education, adapting the new technologies as they develop. And societies will have to work with physicians and patients and legislators and politicians to make it happen. But there's no reason why at least 70% of doctor-patient interactions cannot be conducted with telemedicine. The other point is that there are parts of the country that are remote, not just in India, but in the United States. Sanjeev Arora, who's behind the ECHO project, has done a wonderful job of delivering hepatitis C care on the Indian reservations in New Mexico and Arizona, and the same examples could be applied to remote areas in India. So there's so much good that can be done that I think we should stop focusing on the barriers and move on. Of course, barriers need to be identified, but we need to work around them.
Yeah, thanks, Ranjit. But barriers help us in identifying what we need to work on. So, a comment from Charit. Any comment you would like to give on the do's and don'ts and what our learnings from this today's exercise has been?
Sir, 2 points just to pick up from what Dr. Chandra also mentioned. Remote echo, for instance, is going to help people of India tremendously. And I'll give you an example. The number of congenital heart disease, which is there, undiscovered, simple ASDs, the number of heart failures, mitral stenosis complicating in pregnancies. My aim is to use technology and all of your help to get these people into the care pathway. So, of course, working with the Telemedicine Society and CSI will change the landscape of medicine and how it's being practiced today. And finally, it is inevitable. The only way where we can deliver better care at a lower cost to the people at large in this country is for us to adopt telemedicine. I do not see any other way of reducing costs and improving care. Thank you.
Very interesting point you made, because unfortunately in India, even all our population statistics about people with coronary artery disease and including rheumatic heart disease were based only on ECGs, abnormal ECGs, which is so inaccurate that we never got the real figures. And in a country where 9% of the people are diabetics, 25 to 30% of the people are hypertensives, we have a glut of cardiovascular diseases. Sujeeth, any closing point from your side?
Yes, going back to Dr. Goel's point earlier about, if I can make a point there, when you're dealing with telehealth and controlled substances, what we do here in the United States is, two-level authentication is what we do, how we overcome that barrier when you're prescribing controlled substances. So just a thought for you to look in the Indian perspective. As far as the telehealth in general and cardiology in general is concerned, I think we're going to live with this. The COVID was a blessing, blessing in disguise for telemedicine. It catapulted telemedicine into the mainstream, and patients are realizing it, regulators are realizing it, doctors are realizing it. We have to live with it. Now, having said that, if you look at the recent Bill Gates statement about how well Indian government has nailed the financial payment system, wherein every financial application or an institution has to work with a unique payment interface. It's called a UPI. So the moment somebody pays money, Google or whatever, it's instant transfer to the bank is happening. So the UPI. So extending the same corollary into health, National Digital Health Mission is working on. I think they are on the right path. They're creating a unique health record for a patient. So you're basically creating a digi-locker, a digital locker, a medical locker. So all the patients' unique medical records, government maintains it, and then any third party can subscribe to it, pull that data, use it, point of care, and then the data goes back to the DigiLocker. I think National Digital Health Mission is working on a correct path. So, I think we have a very bright future in telemedicine going forward.
Manick, any comments from your side?
Yes, doctor. As Dr. Ranjit Suri had mentioned, technology and regulations will be fashioned by market forces. But on the ground, our experience has been that the best combination of the attending physician and the specialist is a key to making this work, because the attending physician will be the eyes and ears right there at the point of contact, and the specialist, if you can make judicious use of his time, and we've been able to do that very easily, and you can ensure that the best input is given for the initial stabilization and further care.
So thank you so much. Where it's like it's got.
Anil, I would like to make just 2 quick points, very short. This is what I always say at the end of my talks to in any forum. You see, being wise is understanding what you can do with technology and accepting what you cannot do. That is point number one. Second one is telehealth at the best, or telemedicine technology at best, is an enabler. It's a force multiplier, as we call it in the armed forces. It is not and can never be a substitute for the clinician. So that is what we need to keep at the base level, at the back of our thoughts and all our actions while using technology in the delivery of healthcare. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ashwini. Thank you for giving us this opportunity. I thank all my distinguished panelists. I know I woke up Ranjit at 1 in the morning. Even for Sujeeth, it must be 9:30, 10 at night. And Manick has contributed. We've had Nishith, Atul making brilliant contribution. And we've had Dr. Mohanan, the president of the Cardiological Society of India, Dr. Manohar, who gave us a perspective of the STEMI India project. We've had Oommen, who gave us a perspective, a bird's eye view into the National Digital Health Mission. Charit, who has taught us not only about the system for ECG, which he's implementing as a force augmenter and a multiplier, amplifier, but now with a point of care ultrasound. And so I think we've had, and Ashwini, who's come up with his smart words of wisdom. So I think we've had lots and lots of, he's got a new beard, which is a new addition. I think he takes after the worthy Prime Minister. So I think with this, we are already running behind time and I'm getting some messages. I was trying to dissuade the conversation from getting prolonged, but here is the president-elect of the Telemedicine Society, who himself has taken
now the president. Now the president.
Congratulations. So the party is due. Okay. So thank you all. Thank you for this opportunity. I will request Ashwini to send us a transcript because Charit has promised to help us in writing up a quick paper. And maybe we can include inputs from Ranjit. We can include lots of inputs came in the chat box from Oommen. I'm going to download this. Some of these articles, it'll be great. We can just have a group where some of these papers can be shared. And then Nishith is always keen to publish something. And I'm sure if we can get together something like a paper or a document, then we will also request the Cardiological Society of India to put up a working group and to take this further. Maybe if the opportunity arises, we'll hold a more detailed conversation on specific aspects. I think the wearables need to be discussed separately. The home monitoring needs to be discussed separately. Lots of issues need to be discussed separately. But I think thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for having us. And thank you all for bearing with the technical glitches. Thank you, sir.
From the Telemedicine Society of India, I wish to convey my deep and heartfelt thanks to all of you. Anil for curating this entire session. And of course, my special thanks to the president of the CSI, Dr. Mohanan, and the entire galaxy of these stars of the cardiology scenario in India and abroad. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ranjit. Sorry to wake you up.
Thank you.
Dr. Ajay Alexander, you can start with your session.